Under the quiet hush of a Wyoming evening, the air felt thick with dust and silence. The dying sun bled gold through the open barn doors, touching the hay and the worn wood in soft firelight. The rancher stood near the tack wall, one hand braced against a beam as he studied her. She stood a few feet away, trembling, her breath shallow. Her dress, blue cotton faded by sun, hung loose at the shoulders, dirt on the hem from the long ride. The air between them quivered with something unsaid, something both feared and needed. He'd found her hours ago by the fence line, tangled in barbed wire, her horse dead beside her. He'd carried her in, patched the cut along her arm, and tried not to ask questions. But now, as she swayed where she stood, he could see she wasn't just wounded. She was hiding something deeper. "Please, don't take it off," she whispered, voice shaking like wind through dry grass. He froze, his hand half lifted toward her shoulder where the fabric was torn and dark with blood. Her eyes darted up to his, wide and pleading, and he could see that terror wasn't born from modesty. It was fear, pure and raw, something old and unhealed. "I ain't here to hurt you," he said quietly, the deep rumble of his voice steady but low. The barn light flickered across his face, dust motes turning like gold stars in the air. "You've got a fever, ma'am. I need to see how bad the wound is." She shook her head, her dark hair sticking to her damp cheeks. "No, please, not that one." He looked at her, confused, his fingers tightening slightly around the torn cloth. The cut wasn't the one on her arm, it was lower, hidden beneath her sleeve near her shoulder blade. He could see blood seeping slowly, matting the fabric. It had to come off or the infection would spread, but her fear stopped him. He straightened a little, drawing a slow breath. "What's under there?" he asked softly. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, tears filled her eyes and she turned slightly away from him, clutching her arms around herself as if trying to hold her body together. He could see her shaking, her shoulders heaving. He took a cautious step forward. He'd dealt with scared Mustangs, wild dogs, dying men. But this was something different. This was a wound of the soul. She flinched as he moved closer but didn't run. Her back brushed the wall of the barn, her breathing uneven. The horse in the next stall shifted restlessly, the faint jingle of the bridle breaking the silence. "All right," he said finally, his tone low, gentle. "I won't touch it." "Not yet." Her head turned slightly, and for the first time he saw her face in full light. She was young, too young to have eyes that looked like that. There were shadows in them, deep ones. "Thank you," she whispered. But when she stepped forward, the blood loss caught up with her. Her knees buckled. The rancher lunged forward and caught her before she hit the ground. Her body was fever hot against his arms, and her breath came shallow and fast. "Easy now," he murmured. "Easy, miss." He carried her to the hay pile near the lantern and laid her down gently. Her hand caught his wrist, surprisingly strong for someone so weak. "Don't look," she said again, and there was such terror in the plea that he froze mid-motion. He met her eyes. "I won't. You got my word." Her fingers loosened slowly, trust flickering like a dying candle. He turned away, grabbed a clean cloth, and soaked it in cool water from the tin basin. Then with care, he began wiping the blood from her arm and forehead. She winced but didn't pull away. After a few minutes, her breathing evened out. The fevered heat of her skin began to cool slightly. He could see the sweat glistening on her neck, her lashes trembling as her eyes fluttered open again. "Where am I, my ranch? Near Dead River." "You fell off your horse," he said quietly. "It's gone, miss." Sorry to say, she nodded faintly, lips pale. "I know, it ran into a hole. Broke its leg." She stopped mid-sentence, her voice catching. Her hand instinctively brushed the torn part of her sleeve again. He sat back on his heels, studying her carefully. "You're safe here. Whoever did that to you?" Her eyes snapped open, fierce despite the weakness. Don't ask, please." He nodded once. "All right." The wind outside moaned softly against the barn doors, stirring the hay. Dusk had deepened to full night now, the moonlight silvering through the cracks in the boards. She lay there for a moment, breathing quietly, then her voice came again, faint, but trembling with something like shame. "There's a mark, burned into my skin. That's why I said not to take it off." He looked at her, silent. "It's not what you think," she said. "I didn't do anything wrong. They said I belonged to him, so they branded me like I was his cattle." The words hit him like a bullet to the chest. His jaw tightened, eyes flicking toward the shadowed corner of the barn. He'd seen plenty of cruelty in his life, Indians, outlaws, bounty hunters, but branding a woman like livestock, that was hell itself. He drew in a long, controlled breath. I understand. You don't have to show me. Her eyes filled again, tears spilling down to her temple. They said no man would touch me again after that. Said I was ruined. The rancher's hand clenched at his knee. Whoever said that's a liar. She looked at him, surprised by the fire in his tone. He leaned closer, voice steady, almost quiet. Ain't no mark can ruin a soul, miss. You hear me? You survived. That's what matters. Her lower lip trembled. She looked at him as though trying to believe it. You didn't even ask my name, she said after a long pause. Didn't think you were ready to tell it, he replied. She gave the faintest smile, fragile as spring frost. It's Clara. He nodded. Samuel. The silence between them softened. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote cried out, long and lonesome. You should rest, he said after a while. Tomorrow we'll see about getting you some proper clothes. But when he reached to pull a blanket over her, his hand brushed her shoulder by accident, and she gasped. Not in pain, but in reflex. His eyes met hers, and something wordless passed between them. Fear, trust, maybe both. Then, slowly, he pulled back. Sorry. She shook her head faintly. Doubt it, you're the first man who's touched me without hurting. He froze. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the creak of the rafters and her uneven breath. Then he stood abruptly, turned away, and gripped the stall door to steady himself. His heart beat hard against his ribs. He'd seen scars before, seen women run from bad men, but something about her voice, soft, cracked, still holding on to dignity despite all that pain, hit him somewhere deep. She watched him in the half-light, eyes following the broad shape of his shoulders. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. There was something about him, solid, quiet. Like the earth itself, you can look now, she whispered suddenly. He turned, confused. She shifted slightly, pulling her sleeve down just enough for him to see the edge of the brand. A cruel burned letter seared into her skin. His breath caught. It wasn't the shape that froze him, it was the recognition. He knew that brand. He'd seen it before, on cattle driven through the valley by a man named Deacon Rowe, the same man who'd burned ranches and stolen women across the frontier 2 summers ago. He went still as stone, every muscle locked. What's wrong? She asked softly, sensing his change. He didn't answer for a long time. Finally, his voice came out rough, cold. That mark, was it a D with a line through it? She nodded faintly. Yes. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkening like a storm over the plains. Deacon Rowe. Her eyes widened. You know him? He looked at her then, the rage he'd buried for years flickering in his eyes. He took my brother's land. Killed him when he wouldn't sign over the deed. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the wind rattling the barn doors, the low murmur of the horses shifting in their stalls. Then Clara whispered, I ran from him 3 days ago. He'll come looking. He looked down at her, his expression hardening. Not here, he won't. You don't understand, she said weakly. He always finds, he cut her off gently. Not this time. She looked at him for a long moment, reading the certainty in his eyes. For the first time since she'd stumbled onto his land, something eased inside her. A quiet belief that maybe she was finally safe. Outside, thunder rumbled over the hills, promising rain. Samuel crossed to the door and bolted it, his silhouette tall and still in the faint lantern light. You get some rest, Clara, he said. I'll keep watch. She nodded faintly, exhaustion pulling at her. As her eyes closed, she saw the outline of him standing there, broad-shouldered, motionless, a silent guardian against the night. And when the storm broke over the ranch, with lightning flashing across the plains, he didn't move. His eyes stayed on the darkness beyond the barn, waiting, knowing that somewhere out there was a man marked by the same evil burned into her flesh. For now, though he listened to the slow rhythm of her breathing, steady at last, and felt something in him shift. The world had taken everything from her, but as long as he stood, she wouldn't lose another thing. In that quiet, storm-wrapped barn, the rancher finally understood what he'd been riding toward all his life. Not vengeance, not peace, but a single purpose: to keep going until someone could sleep without fear again.